welcome to Bots and Beyond, your weekly dose of all things automation, mixing up end user, vendor and consultant experience to create your go-to podcast for bot-related insights. I am your host, Wayne Butterfield. So, episode 2 of Bots and Beyond, some great feedback from the first episode. So again, thanks to Kieran Gilmurray and our discussion on citizen developers, which is gaining lots of traction and is a really topical discussion right now. The great content keeps coming, as does the great guests. I really love the title of this episode, When BCP Planners Became Gods. It's so apt, as BC planning came out of the doldrums and became the hottest topic, at least for a few weeks, until we realized that those plans were not as safe and secure as we expected. I'm delighted to welcome Ashwin onto today's Bots and Beyond. We had a great pre-discussion and we really got into a great debate around business continuity planning, around business resilience strategy. And it felt so apt in this world of automation, and where automation and other technologies will really play a role in the future. So Ashwin, great to have you join me this week.
Great. So thank you, Wayne, for having me on your show. I'm Ashwin Gaidhani, and I've been in the IT service management industry for about past 17 years and recently shifted into the AI automation practice field. Today, I'm a principal at the DIGITALFABRIC and an advisory leader at AISWITCH, which is an AI automation practice and research company. What I do, it took 17 years for me to realize that my strength in advisory and consulting, which is ideation, articulation, and presentation. So I chose to work in the field of the digital transformation and contribute to the entire ecosystem, leveraging my experience. Why I do it? I believe we have simpler ways of doing things, especially when we have complex environments around us. And recently in the digital transformation field. So I know it's not that simple, but I have always believed that when you're sorted in head, you're sorted at work. So I chose to pursue my passion.
So business resilience strategy. Crisis management, business service continuity, disaster recovery. Now, they really came to the fore during COVID. And I know this is something that you are really passionate about. You've got a load of knowledge. Talk to me about this.
So here we have 3 cornerstones: the business resiliency strategy that supports as the business continuity, the disaster recovery, and the crisis management. So for leaders, I think it is a realistic translation of the Documentation to Implementation Act, right, Wayne? So because if you look at it, the gap analysis is the actual testimony to gauge the readiness and the commitment of your organization to address any unprecedented event. So it is imperative for almost every organization to focus on these 3 core processes. Earlier, if you recollect, these 3 processes were incorporated in the IT service management framework, which is the ITIL, but no one paid enough focus on them. But suddenly 6 months before, as the title goes of the question, that these 3 processes and the process managers were in demand and held pivotal role in executing the strategy or the actions which were directed by the enterprise leaders. So yes, I think it is time for almost all organizations to start working on these 3 cornerstones, which is the business services continuity, the disaster recovery, and the crisis management.
So business continuity planners, they're going to have another chance, clearly. I guess the long-term fix is around 3 things, as it usually always is: people, process, and technology. What's your view on this?
So when we consider all the 3 cornerstones, which is the business continuity, the disaster recovery, and the crisis management, in the erstwhile world, I guess the roles. So when we talk about people, it's all about roles. And all these roles were probably shared between the multiple roles, as we did not really consider the intensity of the role until last 6 months. So here I think most of the ACP managers need to work on segregating or segmenting the business service continuity and IT service continuity, and then the customer service continuity. So these three sectors, because IT service is something internal, which they have to take care of how to keep the central nervous system on. Service continuity is to keep the information and the transaction going on, and the customer service continuity is to meet the commitments of their customers. Once we have identified these roles, I guess the next important part to play is of the process, because process is something that seamlessly integrates all your entities when it comes to IT, your service, and your customer. So process is all about how the transaction is flowing, regardless of any circumstances or situations. And the technology is the key player who enables the entire platform. So we also have to focus on embedding the technology with the right people and refined processes to ensure we are covering the business continuity, the disaster recovery and crisis management processes. So when I speak about technology here, I think automation, security, and cloud are the three torch bearers which have a very crucial role to play in their own capacity to ensure all these three cornerstones are performing at their full capacity.
Excellent. And I think the really interesting point that you've just laid on there is the role of automation in business continuity planning for the future. I think it's a really important point because I think for most organizations, automation, robotics, etc., will not have been part of their plans. I'm guessing it's something that they seriously need to think about. So when we start to think about technology, we need to think about how technology could be utilized in order to negate the people problem that something like COVID presented. So as we start to think, I guess, about automation and how we can use automation to be more resilient in the future, one of the conversations I've been having with a number of different service providers has been around almost like a KPI that is geared around the number of, blood workers, human workers versus silicon workers and bots. And what best practice actually looks like. Now, I don't think we have best practice now, but what's your kind of view on, the human versus the silicon worker? And should there be targets around that moving forward for business continuity planning purposes?
Presently, when we talk about the business continuity, I think it's a lot to do about human intervention and human action. So I guess the business continuity plays a very good use case to infuse automation and see how we can transfer most of the human effort and take help of the bots or the silicon workers to assist humans. So here, I guess few interesting KPIs would be the load of work which has been transferred onto the silicon workers, and also which can be effort optimization index. And then if we could also look at a KPI that talks about your human workers versus the silicon workers index, so how many bots per human or how many humans per bot, and you can transform that and then slowly see how you can increase. And the third thing I would probably recommend or mention is about the dynamic repurposing of bots, where I guess we are working towards using the bots optimally when they have no work. So maybe we can code them to do multiple tasks at the same time or when they're idle.
Fantastic. And I guess one of the things that I've seen come to the fore more recently, there's a number of different products in the market now who are specifically geared around optimizing bots so that they never become idle. So definitely a topical discussion point there, Ashwin. So Ashwin, one of the things you brought to my attention was the term change blindness. Now, I know this is something you wrote a great article on, which I've read up on to make sure that I was in the know. And I think it's really interesting what you've written. I think it'd be great for the audience to kind of get a feeling of, hey, what is change blindness in your view, and why has it been such a prominent challenge that has been uncovered via COVID?
I've been a victim of change blindness myself, because probably if you go back in time in 2013 and 14, you'll realize that we were so customer centric and focused on, to delivering value to our customers with available resources, that the automation, AI, all these waves were the undercurrents which were probably growing, and a lot of the development was happening around these fields. But I was one fine day surprised to understand and know that we have so many organizations that were working on providing automation solutions and AI capabilities and models. So I was a victim myself, and change blindness is again a phenomenon that is very familiar or relatable to the magician's world, probably where you have this hand movement, or you have this beautiful assistant on the stage to distract you while he's doing his magic and probably wow you. So if you look at it, the definition of change blindness is probably its failure to notice a surprisingly significant change from one moment to the next when your attention is focused or locked on one activity. So maybe our complete inclination towards delivering value to customers was so engrossed and so focused that we failed to notice what was happening around. And why I say this is because we all were surprised by the kind of transformations or the kind of developments that were happening in the industry in probably all the emerging technology areas, right? So because we had so many new things coming up. So that's where I believe some way or the other, the enterprises, the businesses have been a victim of change blindness. A very good example of change blindness is a Sony Cybershot. We have high chances that no one noticed how Cybershot vanished from the shelves and got integrated into the cameras. So I guess it is the integration of various components and capabilities into one. I guess the same thing is going to happen with a lot many other the devices, for example, like let's say Sony PlayStation and Xboxes with 5G and enhanced computing powers trying to come into life. I believe the same thing is going to happen with the PlayStations as well.
Brilliant. And do you think that could also happen in the automation world? So I know when we've spoken previously, RPA as an example, just becoming a component of multiple products. And it just no longer being a standalone, very similar to the Sony Cybershot. Now, most people don't carry a phone and a Cybershot around with them. Very few people would. Now, there's always going to be a role for professional photographers, right? So it's not that the particular product would ever completely disappear or the product type would disappear. But certainly from an automation perspective, what do you see in the future for automation platforms overall?
I would relate this with probably mainstream automation versus integrated automation. Okay, because right now we see that almost the complementing technologies like process discovery, process mining, AI capabilities, narrow AI capabilities, IoTs, everything is combining with one another to form one integrated product. And that product is iPhone here in this context. So professional photography is still going to have its own vertical, for example, like the analytics or the artificial intelligence capabilities, which are going to exist for more pure play, subject-specific research and assistance. So iPhone can be referred to a perfect example where almost all the technology components, capabilities are going to converge to solve your real life problems.
Excellent. So certainly a convergence of multiple technologies under one banner, and I'm sure that would be welcome news to the users of UiPath and Blue Prism and Automation Anywhere. But that doesn't necessarily mean that RPA on its own, I guess, as an expert technology from expert vendors, is completely done and dusted. Ashwin, amazing insights. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to join me on Bots and Beyond. Look forward to our continued discussions and debates on LinkedIn. For anyone who wants to follow Ashwin, he'll be mentioned in the podcast episode. All his information will be in the podcast related posts, and I'm sure you will see him around soon. So thank you very much, Ashwin. As always, great to catch up, and I'll speak soon.
It's my pleasure, Wayne, and thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to ISG Automation's Bots and Beyond podcast, your weekly dose of all things automation. See you next week for more news and views on RPA, intelligent automation, and AI.